Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to learn a little bit about AB Dynamics tonight. This is in complete contrast to the last two presentations. We're now going to talk about a specific company, we're going to talk about technology, and we're going to talk about how that's applied in the automotive sector. So, AB Dynamics is a high technology engineering business that's focused primarily on niche growth areas within the automotive sector, and in particular around advanced driver assistance systems, and I'll use the phrase ADAS a few times to describe that tonight, which are systems that are used on vehicles to aid safety of vehicles, automation and electrification of vehicles. So tonight I'm going to give you an overview of AB Dynamics. What do we do? What markets do we play in? A little bit about some of the market drivers that have driven our growth and will drive the growth in the future, and how that relates to our strategy. Our acquisitions approach, and then I'll summarize at the end. So, what does AB Dynamics do? Well, we're split down into four primary sectors here. Most of what we do, the vast majority, is in the automotive sector, but we do nothing that goes on a production vehicle, and that's really important to note. So production volumes are almost irrelevant to our business. We do sell products and services and software that's used to develop vehicles and is used by automotive OEMs and tier ones globally. So we're split into four main sections. Testing products is our largest sector. Within that sector, we sell driving robot systems. These are systems that you can fit to a vehicle that will drive that vehicle without the need for a driver. We can typically convert any vehicle within about an hour, and you can have it driving around on its own. So we'll take control of the steering, the pedals, the positioning, the speed very accurately. We then do ADAS platforms, so driver assistance system platforms. These are low-profile electric vehicles that are designed to be run over, and you'll see a video in a moment that describes that. And on top of that is a dummy vehicle, or a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a scooter, or a motorcyclist. So these are used to then test those systems on board vehicles. We also provide laboratory test equipment that is used for evaluation of what's called kinematics and compliance on vehicles. So sorry, I'm going to get a little bit technical tonight. But this is ride, handling, and suspension behavior on vehicles. So I can pretty much guarantee that everyone in this room would have driven a vehicle developed using AB Dynamics products and services. I'm 100% sure of that. Testing services, we operate a proving ground in California where we can actually conduct these tests using our own products for US customers, typical automotive OEMs, but also regulators that set safety standards for vehicles. We have a laboratory-based proving ground test facility in Michigan where we test electric vehicles and their drivetrains, particularly at low temperature. Some of you may be aware that the range on electric vehicles reduces at low temperature. We're able to replicate those and test drivetrains within that facility. And we also conduct on-road test and evaluation of vehicles, particularly in Asia Pacific, mostly on behalf of German automotive OEMs, where we look at real-world range performance, battery performance, charging infrastructure, connectivity, and all of those kind of things. A large growth area for us is simulation, and that splits down into two main parts. We provide physics-based simulation software that is used to evaluate the performance of vehicles using realistic physics. So there's lots of providers of software out there, but ours is the one that replicates the real world in terms of the physics you see. And the picture you can see on that slide there, that is a driving simulator. We produce full motion, high frequency, low latency driving simulators. These are not games, these are systems that are engineering grade and designed to produce engineering data for the development of vehicles. So most of what we're doing is in the space of driver assistance, electric drivetrain performance, and in automation and autonomy. And finally, the part on the end there is solutions. This is where we're taking our core technology in driving robotics and applying it to new markets. So we've moved into off-highway vehicle applications where we are now retrofitting driving robots into vehicles to take the driver out and automate their function. The main area we're focusing on there is mining trucks, where these are high-value, relatively low-volume applications but obviously mine operators are prepared to pay significant sums for improved safety, productivity, and efficiency. So I'm now going to show you a couple of videos. One is around our testing products side of things. You'll see a driving robot as well as an ADAS platform, and then I'm going to show you a simulation video. So hopefully if I click this. So that is a soft car. May look a bit strange to the human eye, but to a radar system on a vehicle, it looks like a real car and is designed to be. Here we're doing a head-on collision. So we have a system being set up in the vehicle, which is a driving robot, which is steering the vehicle and controlling that. And here is our low-profile electric vehicle coming the other way. And we are closing speed of 144 kilometers an hour, and you'll see what happens. So that platform you can see sliding along to the right there, that can go 120 kilometers an hour. It is 75 millimeters high, and you can drive over it with a truck over and over again. And the whole point of this is we're evaluating the safety systems on that vehicle. So obviously you can see the tape on the front of there. We've covered up the sensor so we can have a head-on collision. What would actually happen is, of course, it would detect that coming towards it. The automatic emergency braking system, the radar system, would pick up that object and hopefully bring it to a controlled stop. In this case, we just did it for dramatic effect. So that's the driving robots and ADAS platform side of our track testing products. The next thing I'm going to show you now is a video of a simulation. This is our company RF Pro, the physics-based simulation software. In this one, we actually can create highly accurate digital twins of the real world. So some of you may recognize the beautiful city of Coventry. Here we have a 1 centimeter accurate digital twin. It looks almost like videos. And you can see it's been raining, so you can see how the light reflects off the puddles, reflects off the side of vehicles. Now, the reason we've done this is because that's how sensors actually see the real world. So things like gaming technology and graphics engines aren't very useful for this. You have to actually replicate how light behaves, how it reflects off surfaces, puddles, and so on, if you're using a camera, a LiDAR sensor, or a radar sensor on a camera on an autonomous vehicle to determine its performance. So, who are our customers? All global automotive OEMs are our customers. I think you'd struggle to name a customer that is not, and that includes all of the Asian, Chinese OEMs as well. It's one of our biggest markets. We also sell to regulators and government bodies who are responsible for setting the regulations and standards to test these vehicles to make sure they're safe to be deployed on public roads. So, for example, NHTSA in the US or CATARC in China. We supply to tier 1 suppliers to the automotive industry, so tire manufacturers, sensor manufacturers, and things like that. We sell to testing services providers, operators of proving grounds and laboratories. And we also sell to motorsport teams. So most of the Formula 1 teams, for example, utilize our software for simulation and race planning. We have direct sales and support presence in all key markets. So we have direct sales in Japan, we have UK, US, and Germany. And we have very long-term customer relationships. Whilst our top 10 customers might ebb and flow from year to year, they're all in that top 50 as we go through. So the majority of our sales are to automotive OEMs. And as you can see, our biggest market is Asia Pacific, dominated by China, number 1, and then Japan and Korea. UK and EU is dominated by Germany, naturally, with the German automotive sector, and I heard that referred to earlier, but actually, for us, the last 3 years, Germany has been our fastest growing market, ironically. Because, as I said, production volumes is not what's relevant here. They're investing in technology to make sure they can stay ahead going forward, not immediate car launches. We're talking 5 years' time, 7 years' time. And then North America is also a big growth market for us, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. So just a little bit about track record. The company IPO'd in 2013, and since then we've delivered 22% compound annual growth rate in both revenue and adjusted operating profit. I can't really talk about 2024 too much because we're just past our year end. We'll be announcing our results later on in the year, but we issued a trading update that said we'll be above 110 million and also above the top end of expectations on adjusted operating profit, and we've had some good margin improvement during the year as well. So we have a very strong balance sheet. We are net cash. We have no debt. At the end of August, we had just under 30 million of cash to deploy, which gives us lots of options in terms of how we invest in R&D and ongoing acquisitions. So one thing I'll touch on a bit later, our growth has been driven by, and our future growth is underpinned by, long-term regulatory and structural growth drivers. The company has around 540 employees. We're across 6 countries in 11 sites. I joined the business in 2018 over here. And since then, we've developed those 3 new market sectors of simulation, testing services, and automation. And we've also delivered a really strong growth in our recurring revenue. So back in 2018, we were doing 8% recurring revenue. We're now doing around 50% recurring revenue. And we've also been doing lots of acquisitions in that time. We've delivered 6 successful acquisitions since 2019. And over the last few years, we've been investing a lot in our operating platform to make sure we continue that growth profile. And you can see really the only dip in this graph here is around the COVID years. It spanned 2 financial years for us. So we did have a small influence and reduction in operating profit there. But since then, we've been growing out of it. Right, I'm going to need to accelerate. I've got 9 minutes left. So, really important. We're doing this. Our purpose is about reducing road safety, reducing accidents on roads. There are 1.35 million fatalities on roads every year globally. That's a huge number. And the vast majority of those are in low and middle income countries. 20 to 50 million, depending on which year you're talking about, road-based injuries a year, which has a massive impact on GDP. And over half of those fatalities relate to pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. So a key area for us. So what are our growth drivers? Well, there are 2 things. I mentioned regulation earlier. So the use of these driver assistance systems is now mandated by regulation in most countries worldwide. Okay, they vary different parts of the world at different stages in the implementation of their regulation, but they are all now covered by regulation in one form or another. In fact, the US have just recently announced the use of autonomous emergency braking on vehicles now. That wasn't mandated at all in the US. So by 2029, all new cars that are sold in the US have to have these systems on board. And interestingly, their standards are far higher now than the current EU standards. So not only is it US manufacturers have to meet this standard, anyone who wants to sell into the US market also has to. So the German manufacturers, the Japanese manufacturers all have to do the same. And the reason why is that graph there on the bottom right. So over the last 10 years or so, the EU has implemented regulation for these systems, and we've seen road-based deaths coming down consistently. In the US, we've seen it going the opposite way. And that's what prompted the US government to regulate for this area. So there are a number of things that are driving our growth. First of all, number of tests. See that graph on the top right there? Back in 2016, 80 tests required to get a Euro NCAP, New Car Assessment Program, star rating for your car. It's now over 600 tests. And that they've just released their 2030 roadmap, and let's just say the graph continues on the same trajectory. Also, new models coming to market. There's lots of volume of new models coming to market. They also need to be tested. And the complexity of the test is getting more and more difficult, which drives new equipment requirements. So those are the external factors. Internally, as I mentioned earlier, our products and services are not related to automotive production volumes. We have invested the last few years, and so we expect to see strong operating leverage come through the business now as our revenue grows. And because of our products being highly differentiated against the competition, it drives very strong gross margins. And we have lots of opportunities internally now to invest in technology, our supply chain, and our manufacturing processes to reduce our cost of sales and increase our gross margin going forward. We're going to continue to grow our recurring revenues through an increased proportion of software, but also support and long-term relationships. So our customer relationships are sticky, they're long-term, and we often try and get our customers signed up to long-term support contracts. Internally as well, we've dreaded ERP word. Everyone runs for the hills when they hear that, but we finished it. It's all done. We're just rolling it out to our overseas offices at the moment. And we completely transformed the business over the last few years in terms of our operating processes. We continue to invest in new products and technologies. We have a long-term roadmap that drives our future growth. And we've invested in all of our people and talent across the group to drive the next phase of growth. So very briefly now, just a little bit about our capital allocation framework. It's very simple. We apply our capital to investing in product development and R&D in our core business, in the ABD Solutions business, which was the automation conversion of off-highway vehicles. We will fund our acquisition program where they meet the criteria to accelerate our strategic priorities, and we have a progressive dividend policy, albeit relatively small. So a little bit on acquisitions now. As I mentioned, we delivered 6 acquisitions over the last 5 years. We've had 2 in the UK, we've had 2 in the US, 1 in Germany and 1 in Asia. 2 are in the field of simulation, 3 in the field of testing services, and then 1 more recently, only just recently acquired, Bolab Systems in Germany, which is a testing products-based business. The idea behind these is where we are taking niche businesses that have got really differentiated products and technology. Quite often, though, they're constrained geographically. A great example is Ansible Motion. We acquired in 2022, a UK-based business, very limited channels to market globally. We were able to use our channels to market in China, and within less than a year of acquiring them, we'd sold 2 over £3 million simulators into the Chinese market, and they'd never sold into China previously. Bolab Systems is another great example. German business, lots of good German customers, but very limited access to the wider geographies. And through our direct sales offices, particularly in Japan, the US, China, we're able to actually sell directly, cross-sell that product to our existing customers. So what do we look for? Well, the market, first of all, is quite large and it's quite fragmented. There are lots of small to medium-sized businesses in this space. Any acquisition that we make needs to accelerate our growth and our strategic priorities. We focus on businesses that have a strong track record of growth. They have high gross margins typically, which means they are differentiated somehow in the market and therefore premium pricing. And then we operate them in a very much a hybrid model. So they're quite independent. They keep their own brand. They still service their customers directly, but they benefit from the synergies of being part of a larger group with centralized functions and the ability to cross-sell. And presently, we have the classic phrase, a good long-term pipeline of very attractive acquisition targets. But all of these are about compounding our growth. And therefore, they support our long-term growth aspirations. So, in the interest of staying on track, to summarize, so we've got a strong track record of profitable, very cash-generative growth. As I mentioned, 22% compound growth in both revenue and profit since IPO. The business model is supported by very strong long-term regulatory and structural growth drivers. We've continued to invest in new product development, capabilities and operational improvements to continue to drive growth. And now we have a clear strategy in place that's going to continue to be driven by those market drivers, but also adding incremental revenue through new products into the market. Margin expansion is a major focus for us now. We're currently sort of in late teens. We want to get that back above 20% again in the very short term. We can do that partly through operating leverage, but also some self-help initiatives that we have. And that strong balance sheet, no debt, net cash, gives us lots of optionality for investing in continued R&D, new product development, and then, of course, further value-enhancing acquisitions as we move forward. I'm actually bang on time, so let's move on to questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very good. Okay, we have a couple of questions down the front. Give me a moment. Chris or Steve, please.
Who's first?
Down here first, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah. You don't seem to have a presence in Korea, but you are present in Singapore What's the rationale?
Okay, so we made an acquisition of a company that was headquartered in Singapore. So we inherited their office. And the reason for that is that they are providing services on behalf of German OEMs. And so we contract in euros between Singapore and Germany, but a lot of the work is conducted in China. So we do that for obvious reasons.
But how can you get into Korea?
Korea, currently we use an agent.
Sorry?
We use an agent currently in Korea, a third-party agent who represents us. At the moment, the Korean market is good, but it doesn't justify us putting in a direct sales office there at the moment. We've done it in Japan, the US, and Germany, and Korea would be next on the list.
Okay.
Question towards the back, please. Thank you.
It would appear that you have a wide moat because of the nature of the work and your acquisitions. Who checks that your results are appropriate for the regulator? And on a related question, Tesla has had problems with its autonomous drives. Who carries the can for that? Because you've done the testing, does the liability fall to you?
First of all, we provide the products to our customers that do the testing. The responsibility for those results and interpretation of the results are their own. So we have no contractual liability for any production vehicles on the basis of those results. Now, naturally, the systems need to be calibrated and checked and everything else. Where we're providing testing services, so for example, the particular organization you mentioned, we provide the proving ground, we provide the equipment, we provide the resources, but their engineers are on site doing the work, and their data that they get from our systems is very much confidential and with them. We don't own that data, we don't use that data. So how they use that data then to prove to the regulator the system is safe, that's their relationship.
And just on that, is there any sort of quality checking to the systems that you provide?
Sorry, say that again.
Is there any quality checking of the systems that you provide to make sure that the
Of
data
course,
coming
yeah.
out
I mean, naturally, all of our systems are producing the correct data. They have to be have maintenance and calibration and all those things to make sure that they're within parameters, and then that data is then accurate on that basis.
Question here, please.
Yeah, hi.
We'll come to you next.
Your presentation, and you didn't mention artificial intelligence once. So,
Yeah.
what are the opportunities to use that for your testing systems, and also with all the data that you're collating across the various solutions, how can you develop new products based on that using artificial intelligence?
Okay, so there's two things. There's artificial intelligence internally in the business. We actually have an artificial intelligence working group at the moment that's looking at opportunities for that. The main areas for us are automation of software development and software testing and those kind of things. So we'll have some efficiencies internally around AI. In terms of its use in what we currently do, it can be used to aid the multi-billion scenarios that are needed to evaluate autonomous driving, for example. So RF Pro, our simulation software business, have just launched a new product called AV Elevate, which is a complete system for evaluation of autonomous systems in a simulated environment. Because if you can imagine, there are tens of billions of scenarios that you could see on a public road. If you look at all of the variables and combine them all together, you cannot do it by driving around on public roads and hoping to stumble across a particular scenario. It doesn't work. Okay, so you have to do it in simulation, and AI can be used to rapidly accelerate that process because you are going to have to do huge numbers of analyses in a massively parallel high-performance computing environment.
Thank you.
Question here, please.
How big is the addressable market that you're serving, and where do you rank in terms of your competitors? Are you number 1, 2, 3, 4?
That is a very long question to answer because it depends which part of the business we're talking about. In our testing products, on the track testing product side of things, the robots and the platforms, we are number 1, no doubt, by some distance. We have 2 main competitors I won't talk about on this video, but they are significantly lower than us, and combined, they don't even get anywhere near us. In driving robots, there is virtually zero competition. When it comes to testing services, we operate in very niche areas. Testing services is a huge 5 billion plus market. So we are tiny in that area, and we have lots of opportunity, but we're only working in specific niche areas that are growing. Simulation, again, a very wide subject. There are many engineering simulation providers, and again, our relative scale is small, but we operate within that physics-based digital twin area, which is an area that's growing quite rapidly.
Question here, Chris, and then we'll come back.
Thank you for a presentation about a fascinating business in an area about which I know virtually nothing. And therefore I come back to the financial side that I arguably do understand slightly.
Yeah.
And if I'd invested 5 years ago, I'd be underwater at this point in time, and the dividend, while small, would not really have compensated for the loss of capital value. I see that the PE ratio is still fairly high, so presumably some people somewhere are considering that the business has serious profit potential coming forwards. And indeed, it put on 4% today, maybe because of the fact that it was a shares presentation and people dashed out and bought. But how do you see that you can make the business return, give good returns for an investor? Because this is undoubtedly an exciting business, but as an investor, I'd rather be in something that was boring and profitable rather than something that was really interesting and losing me money.
Well, this is exciting and profitable and has great growth prospects. The issue is, if you look back at 2019 pre-COVID, then UK stocks, as we know, were much higher then. We're operating at a discount to pre-COVID anyway. The business, it did get a little bit excited, shall we say, back in 2019. Then we had 2 years of 50% growth. And the share price did accelerate quite highly at that point. So if you're comparing that peak, 2019, which is exactly 5 years ago, you're absolutely correct. We're still at a fairly high PE ratio, which represents a growth business. We have lots of opportunity for growth. We're high margin, we're cash generative, we've got firepower. So that's why we attract the premium rating. But looking back historically is not a useful measure. Particularly now with AIM stocks being slightly underrated at the moment for obvious reasons, which let's not get into on the Q&A. But hopefully after the budget we might see some improvements in AIM stocks as well.
Question at the back, please. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. Great presentation. Can you just give me some colour on the underlying contracts within the business? I know you said you've got recurring revenues now up to 50% plus, but are these long-term contracts? And when they're given, are they given for a specific model on a vehicle, or do you get do Tesla sign up for all of their models? How do they work within the business?
It's a mix of new build equipment orders. So someone will literally come along and say, I want a robot, or I want an ADAS platform, a single order. Quite often we get packages of work. So it might be £1 to £1.5 million of platforms, robots, software as a complete system. A lot of the revenue is coming from software on a recurring basis, so annualized licensing. Our new RF Pro AV Elevate option does have a sort of SaaS model to it as well. And then in terms of the support contracts, it's very important we support our customers. So one of the reasons we set up our overseas locations is not just so we can sell, it's so we can support. We hold stock locally, we're in the right time zone, we speak the right language. And that enables us to sell those long-term contracts to support the customers. They might buy the equipment, but then we say we have 3-year contract, 5-year contract, typically, and we operate a tiered service package level, so a typical gold, silver, bronze level of support. And a lot of the contracts and the ongoing revenue comes from that installed base. So as our installed base grows, that recurring revenue grows as well.
I had a question. You said we'd probably all be in a vehicle, a customer of yours. Yeah. What model percentage penetration would you think you had? Are we in every model, or yeah?
Well, we're not careful. We're not in every model.
And we'll be
we have
at some point.
We have used our products to develop every model. So, absolutely.
Question here, please. Thanks, Steve.
How have your staff numbers changed since 2019 or 2015?
So when I joined in 2018, we had 85 staff, and we now have 500. Actually, it's 550. I checked this morning. It's 550 staff.
So that's sort of consistent 20% growth each year, or?
Yeah. No, we've gone from being a UK-only business back in 2018 to being in 6 countries. And some of that's been through acquisition and some of it's been organic.
I had one final question, if I may,
Yep.
time on the shareholder register. And there was a founder-led business, I think, when you
Yep.
came into the market. And could you talk about the shareholder composition?
Yeah, so Tony Best, who was the founder, Anthony Best, AB, he still owns around 24% of the shares. And the rest of the top 10 is essentially institutional shareholders. So our top shareholders are people like Octopus, we have Castlefield, the usual stuff, Lion Trust, those kind of organisations.
Lovely. I think we're going to be out of time there. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For coming tonight. Really great. Thank you.